Well, kia ora koutou. Yes, the word nepotism comes to mind, doesn't it? So, yeah, parking meters. Has anyone ever felt a bit angry at parking meters? Or now, and just for those of you who came for counselling about particular parking companies and so on, I'm not trying to dump on any particular companies or anything, but the actual devices we use to pay for these things. So. Yeah. Anyone remember this kind of parking meter? Used to have coins in the ashtray, and you would, feed the parking meter, and it had a thing that would gradually wind down and so on. Every parking meter in Christchurch was the same. You knew how to use it. The trouble is now, who paid for parking tonight or is about to? Yeah, just about everyone. So sometimes it's a big fridge with stickers all over it saying, don't put your money here and don't put your card here and put it up, and all that sort of thing. Sometimes it's a standalone thing that's been sitting in the rain all day. And sometimes it's an app that you're using, right, to pay for your parking. And it's hard. And, this is at Te Papa Museum. In 2016 is when I started getting interested in bad parking systems. So there was a parking machine there, and I just dropped some kids off at Te Papa and went to park, and there was this huge queue, and it was bucketing with rain actually, and people were getting soaked in the queue, and there was an elderly couple up the front, and they were sort of poking this machine, and they had their credit card, and they were trying to make it work, and you could see the people behind them sort of getting more and more impatient and more wet. And then eventually, and it was sort of a real awkward situation, because every time they'd sort of try to use their credit card, it would time out, and they'd have to go over the whole thing again and punch in how long they'd been and all that sort of thing. And you could see the person behind them and all of us in the queue really itching to go, look, just give us your credit card and tell us your PIN number and we'll pay for it for you. But it's kind of an awkward social situation. But eventually, after about 10 minutes, it really was 10 minutes or so, the couple behind them said, look, do you mind if we help you? And I thought, oh, this will take a half a minute now. It didn't. It still took them 3 or 4 minutes. And every single person in the queue spent at least 2 minutes trying to just extract a parking ticket from this machine. It's just like the worst interface. But I'm not going to share that particular one. Just sharing the consequences of that one. But I will certainly talk about a few others, most of them within about 100-metre radius of this building, actually, as it happens. Not that I'll name any names. But why is parking machines, why are they so hard? And there's a few things going on here. So the first one is that they're a custom design. That there's many different sorts. If we had a monopoly on parking, maybe that'd all be the same, but thankfully we don't. And so everyone's got different machines. You've got to relearn how to use them. And they tend to be designed to work outside and all that sort of thing. So they're actually quite hard to use. Now, because they're not consistent, the one thing I'm actually trying to teach you a bit about human-computer interaction design here. The golden rule of interaction design is consistency. Keep your interface the same as everyone else's. If you really want to stuff things up, just occasionally swap the OK and cancel button and just chaos will ensue. Well, parking meters just do that all the time. They're all so different to each other. And so the next thing is that normally you're in a rush, right? Sometimes you're running late. Sometimes it took forever to find a park. Occasionally you're really relaxed and go, oh, let's explore this machine. Let's read the manual, read the instructions, but not so often. And of course, not only just in a rush, but maybe you're tired. Maybe you've had a bit much to drink, although actually probably you shouldn't be paying for your parking and driving away. Maybe you've got a screaming toddler. Maybe something's gone wrong. And often, we don't think about all the different situations that you might be in. Forgotten some of them need a password. What if you've forgotten the password? What about it's a mobile phone app, but the battery went flat while you were parking, and now you can't tell it to finish your parking? All those sort of things that people need to think of when they're designing these things. And then the next thing is the stakes are high. If you get it wrong, you're going to get an $85 fine, or your car might not be there when you come back. Okay, more likely to just get a fine. And the other thing is that there's quite a high cognitive load in that you have to gamble on how long you're going to be there. Am I going to have a drink afterwards? Am I going to get back soon? Or if it says, no, I'll just keep charging you until you tell me not to, then you've got to remember to tell it to stop it charging for you as well. And the other thing is that they tend to be, if it's there's other people watching. that doesn't, ups the game a wee bit, doesn't it? And often they're really slow machines because they're sitting out, they're weatherproof and all that sort of thing. And by slow, another really important number in interface design is 1/10 of a second. That's how long it is. If you press a button and it doesn't respond in 1/10 of a second, your brain goes, didn't work, and you press it again. Okay, you've done that before. You flick on a light switch, didn't work, flick it again or whatever. And so a lot of the machines around here are like that. So you go to punch in your number plate, press the number, and you go, that didn't work, in 1/10 of a second, press it again, and now you've gone and stuffed up the typing in your number plate, which means you've got to find the cancel button, which is not the normal cancel button because it's not a normal keyboard layout and all that sort of stuff. So there's a whole lot of things going on. Now, cynically, you could also say it only works in the favour of the parking company if you get it wrong, okay? Because instead of charging you $6.50, they get to charge you $85. Right, so we're going to do a little bit of an experiment today. This is not, it is kind of related. You may have come across this. It's called the Stroop effect, named after John Ridley Stroop, who was a psychologist who did horrible experiments on people like I'm about to do. So there are some words up here. Ignore the words, and your job is to say the colour. And so that first one is red, the next one's green, and so on. Okay. Now, yeah, it's a little bit hard, but what I'm going to do is time you, and don't worry, it's not a measure of how clever you are or anything like that. But I'm going to put up a bunch of words. Just quietly say them to yourselves, and when you get to the bottom of the list, put your hand up. Are we ready? So it's the colour of the word, not what the word is. Okay, go. Great. For those of you still going, I'll put it up afterwards. So most of your hands were up by about 8 or 9 seconds, okay? If it was more scientific, I'd actually have measured everyone individually and we'd average it and that. But actually, the typical number is about 9 seconds for most people. Okay, we're going to do it again, and these are called incongruent. We're going to do it with congruent words this time, which means the colour will be correct, okay? And so let's try that. Are you ready? Go. Lovely, okay. So most of the hands went up after about 3 or 4 seconds, which again is what Stroop found out decades ago. In fact, a lot of interface design is just basically finding a use for all the interesting stuff psychologists did way back. But that factor of about 2 or 3 is roughly how long it takes if you really give people dissonant signals, if you confuse them about things. And that can include just showing them something different to what they're used to and they have to figure it out, which is part of the explanation of what's going on with parking meters. In fact, one of the most popular books on interface design is called Don't Make Me Think. And it's just about cognitive load, that you go to use an interface and you're going, do I do this? Do I do that? Is it the cancel button? Is it the not cancel button? And if I press the wrong one, it's going to reset and I'm going to have to start all over again. So there's a genuine thing happening there. So I'm also going to introduce the idea of usability heuristics. And these are guidelines that people use to say, is this a good interface or not? And so I've already said it. One of the most important ones is consistency. Keep things the same. The keyboard on this is not like hardly any other keyboard you've used, unless you've tried to type a password into a TV maybe or something like that. We are trained to use the QWERTY keyboard. There's probably a couple of Dvorak enthusiasts here who are going, no, I'm not. But even on a small mobile phone, our thumbs and our whole brain is trained to move around on a keyboard like that. So it's not consistent. But it also gives me the opportunity to introduce another technical word that you can take away, Fitts law. So Paul Fitts is another psychologist who was interested, interface evaluator, in how long does it take to point at something? And this might not seem like rocket science, but basically, if your finger is here and you need to point at something nearby, it's faster than if the thing's a long way away. Okay, you're convinced, yeah? But it's not just fingers, it's if you're moving a mouse, if you're moving a stylus, even moving your eyes to look at something. So many interfaces actually depend on Fitts law for working it out. Now, there's a bit more to it than that. There's also the idea that if it's the same distance but it's bigger, then you can move to it faster. You can click on that button faster because it's bigger. Kind of obvious. Now, just to make it a little bit more technical, we actually say D is the distance to the thing you're pointing at. W is the size of the thing that you're pointing at, the width. And if you want, here's your science for tonight. The the amount of effort it takes is the log of the ratio of the distance to the size, okay, +1, just to make sure you don't get it zeroing out. So we actually can, if we have the layout of a keyboard, we can estimate how long it takes to move around it. Going back to the QWERTY keyboard, all the unusual, uninteresting letters are stuck over on the side out of the way. On our alphabetical one, they're right in the middle, just where you might need them. Now, as it happens, if you're thinking about it, these are number plates often, and number plates are kind of random. So in fact, it probably isn't quite such an issue here. You get lots of Q's and Z's and number plates, but the problem is that your brain is still trained for the QWERTY keyboard, and you have to try and figure out this new one. It's actually quite hard to type a number plate into this one. Okay, next technical term I'm going to introduce is the idea of a closure error, and that's just quite simple. It's you go to do a task and you think you've finished, but you actually haven't, and you walk away early. So at this point, I'm going to start trotting out all the fines that I've had to pay. And so this is an interaction I had with a company that I won't name. It's probably up there. And so what happened is I wrote back to them and said, look, I was paying for parking on behalf of someone who was helping me, so different number plate. And now that I've checked my receipt, yes, and you sent me the fine, I see that actually it was on my own number plate. Now what had happened is in the app that I was using to pay for this person, I clicked on the number and I typed in the number plate, and then I went back to the main app, and it went, well, you've given me a new number plate, but your default one is this one, so you obviously want to use your default one, even though you've just typed in a new one. Okay, and so that's simply what happened, and that was closure, right? I thought, I've really got to put in this new number plate, typed it in, went back to the app, found the button that said pay now, clicked on it, and we're away. The good thing is that they said, after careful consideration of the evidence, we can confirm actually that you stuffed up. This is the interpretation of that. But the good news is the breach notice has been waived on this occasion. And there's a lot of things that go wrong just because of an interface error. That it's actually the fault of the interface. But I like the way they go, we'll let you off this time. This is just in the news a week or two ago, actually. So someone surprisingly got a fine despite paying the fee. And basically, she was in a hurry, she was running 5 minutes late, and the word accepted appeared on the screen. And so in her mind, she'd paid the money and she could rush off to her appointment. But of course, also on the screen was a button that said confirm or something like that. And yeah, she'd reached closure. Even worse, and they probably did not a lot of investigative reporting needed for this, they found someone else who had a problem with the parking machine. And he did not want to be named, but he got an $85 fine. And when he checked his bank statement, he saw that he had paid and the money had come out of his account and then was reversed a minute later, which sounds a bit evil, doesn't it? And you can see the same things happening, right? And in fact, they said, sorry, I sort of blurred out who it is. I mean, there's so many good parking companies around here, I wouldn't want to besmirch, but they basically they said, well, you didn't press confirm, so we put the money back in your account because you obviously weren't going to park after all or something like that. But the fine would be waived, but ultimately it's your responsibility, and we will not be waiving this in the future. Gil Simpson, one of the great IT people in Christchurch, they fined the wrong person here. He got a ticket, but the situation he had is that he was driving his wife's car instead of his one. And so he had what's called a capture error. And a capture error is where you get into a sequence. So our brains, if we do the same thing over and over lots of times, then it gets into our subconscious and we can just do it automatically and we don't have to think about it, which saves a lot of energy. Okay. Like if I bike home every night, if my wife were to ring me up and say, oh, can you pick up some milk on the way home? I bike out of the university and I start having happy thoughts about my students and things. And then next thing, I'm pulling up at home, and my subconscious has got me to my house with no milk. And I just say, well, sorry, that was a capture error. Go and get your own milk. Bit of relationship advice that does not work. Okay. He had a capture error. He had accidentally used his own number plate, which is the one he's used to typing in, and of course got a fine. And that was the resulted in going to the Small Disputes Tribunal, actually, just to convince them that what had gone on. My favourite machine, though, this is the one that I absolutely love, and some of you may have even used it tonight. I don't know, it's near here. You go along and it says, please enter your licence, plate number, just in case you're wondering which licence, or insert a ticket. Now, this is a ticketless one, so you type in your number. This is when you're leaving, so it's captured your number plate. When you're leaving, you type in the number, and once you've typed in 3 characters, it says, well, let's search for that number plate. Has anyone used this machine? Okay, yeah, you got to use it. It's so cool. So you type in the first 3 letters, and you think, this is great, because there can't be too many other people with that, and it'll offer me a few. And it says, yep, NMM. So that's probably W. That's the one that you wanted, isn't it? Yeah. And it's remarkably enabled. So you actually you end up typing in the whole thing, but it's got a slow keypad, so it is really hard to type in a number plate. You have to stop and just go N, M, and really slow it down and so on. So anyway, eventually you get the number plate in, it matches it and so on, and it says, please pay. And so there's a card reader, and you swipe your card, and it goes beep, and we're done, you would think. It turns out that occasionally, and it's taken me quite a few visits here to figure this out, and I think what's happening is occasionally it goes, oh, you're paying by that kind of card, some kind of pay wave or something. There's an extra fee, and so another thing comes up on the screen saying, please pay another 60 cents or something like that. But of course, you've got closure, and you go, no, I've already paid, and you walk away. And I actually know someone who's done this a couple of times. They thought they'd paid, get to the barrier arm, and of course, it won't go up, and you end up for a long conversation at someone at the other end of the phone. And then, when you've done it, it says, thank you, please take your ticket, when you actually get it right. But there's the ticket slot. But it says, actually, this is a cashless, ticketless car park, so there is no ticket. Yeah, one more slow interface. So this is an occasion where I'd raced in, I was running late, grabbed the mobile app, started typing in all my details. I was walking away from the car park, got a wee way away, just wasn't working, asked for a password or something that I didn't have, so I went back to the machine, and at 11:35 I paid for my parking. Came back at the end, and whoop, wrong direction. At 11:30 I had a parking ticket on my windscreen. Yeah, that was quick. But the whole reason was that it had taken so long to type the thing in, and that I'd given up on it, and then finally gone and paid legitimately for the thing. By the way, all fines that I've shown you tonight, I've managed to get out of them, okay, which is great. Yeah, thank you. One more usability heuristic, you should give good error messages, and you're probably used to getting bad error messages like error number 23 or event cancelled, whatever that means in a car park. This, again, one of my favourite, the error message on this machine was, yeah, die Website ist nicht erreichbar, which is the same machine as the one that needs the double tap and all that sort of thing. But it turns out that even if you don't know what a website or a Reichbar is, you can probably figure out something's wrong, but it doesn't tell you what to do. The thing that actually is should have been another clue is actually, if you look carefully at the keyboard on this thing, the keys are laid out a bit differently. You know, what's that keyboard? It's the German keyboard, okay? In fact, I was in Germany once emailing someone going, this German keyboard is driving me crazy, but the Z and the Y are swapped around, and it's really hard to use if you're not used to it. Consistency. One other trap. I arrived at 10:06 a.m., paid till 3 o'clock, but I popped out at 2 o'clock to grab something, and again, the system just wasn't set up for that situation. It said, well, your car arrived at 2:26 and you didn't, buy a ticket. I complained and I got a response back. Happy New Year, Tim. That was very nice and friendly. Because the systems are set up for people, I won't say where it is, whose behaviour does not normally require multiple entries, we can't deal with that. We see that you did indeed arrive early and paid for the whole thing. So since you made sufficient payment, there will be no further payment required. So yeah, it's really, I thought that was actually a decent thing. Again, April the 24th, this was in the newspaper just the other day. A guy, he wasn't even paying for parking. He went to Bunnings, stayed there for an hour or so, went home, and then came back in the afternoon and left and got a ticket for parking 8 hours. in the car park. And quoting from the newspaper, as a result, the breach notice will stand. I know. I'll finish with a positive take on things. This is a parking machine. Anyone use this one? Gap Filler put one in. It doesn't actually do parking tickets. It just prints out a really nice thing to do around Christchurch, like go and sit in a tree in the park or jump on a tram or something like that. So it's designing good interfaces is really hard, but what I'll finish with is a thought that I really try and get into my students, which is that we don't develop software for computers, we develop software for people, he tangata. Kia ora.
Why do we have so many different keyboard layouts, not just an alphabetical one?
Why do we have many keyboard layouts and not alphabetical?
Yeah.
Well, the QWERTY keyboard which is the common one, was designed a long time ago, and that's a whole different Nerd Night talk. But basically, it comes down to consistency, that once people have learnt that layout, it's way easier to use it. And so if you were to change it, it really would mess people up. And so it's just easier to stick with it. The other ones, well, the Germans, it's just that they use Zs way more than us, and so they've moved it. And the alphabetical one was just someone having a bright idea that it's easier to find things alphabetically, because everyone knows their alphabet. Yeah. Kia ora.
So what are your top 3 ways of getting out of a fine?
Oh, top 3 ways of getting out of a fine. Okay, method 1, ride a bike. Or take the bus. Yeah. But I probably should have put up some of the emails that I've sent them. It's just full of nerd talk, and I can just see the person the other end going, "Oh my God, this, he's going to take our software apart or something if he." No, seriously, pretty much what I've been saying is the kind of things that I write to them. So I've told you everything you need to know. Hopefully. Yeah.
How do they know what time you've come there to that person when they've come 20 minutes later and they're half that time?
Oh, right. They're marking a tyre. I think it's a very crude system, putting a piece of chalk on a tyre. It's how it was used to be, too, back in the day. I think it's just to get a very rough idea that they've probably made those marks 2 hours ago and you've definitely been there too long or something like that. But this is way outside my expertise. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
How many of these people do you think designed it bad on purpose just to get more money?
Oh, right. Was it designed bad on purpose just to make more money? I don't think so, actually. I think a lot of these are really clever. By the way, I must say that most of the stuff is really clever, and it works a lot of the time and so on. But I think it's just really hard to design good interfaces. There are so many different systems around. We don't particularly want to have a monopoly, probably, so we don't want them all to be the same. But there is that thing, and this happens not just here, but in other situations. If your bad software is accidentally making people spend more money or take longer or whatever, there isn't a high motivation to spend money fixing it. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ken.